not coming today. I have to bring in a sick note and I had nobody to write it for me. So I thought I'd just make it happen. But I'm actually in a village hall at the moment celebrating 80th birthday of a friend. And but I thought I'll just pop in. I probably might only be able to stay half an hour or so, but I thought I'd like to come and be here. So.
Well, it's lovely to see you. Do you want to tell a story, Karen?
I have got a very short one for you if you've got time, but if not,
Why
then...
Why don't you go number? If you've done all this, go number one. You go first and get it done.
Help. Does that mean immediately, or are we still chatting?
As soon as we get started, we'll give it 2 minutes to see if anybody else turns up.
Okay, that's great. Yeah.
John, we're doing an introduction. You go first. Keith, you go number two. Yeah. Stella, you go number three.
No, I won't storytell today. I'm in a really bad mood. We held the annual ceremony service of my nephew, he was killed last year. He was really young. I just want to listen today to get some comfort from your stories. I just came to listen and get some comfort. So I will not storytell today.
Okay, Stella, I'll go too. Okay, because I've got a story for you. Okay. Keith,
okay,
you go
thank
three.
You.
Right. Donald, you go four. Yeah. We'll see where everything else. Oh, Despina's here. Oh, okay. Hello, Despina.
Good to see you all.
I didn't think you were coming.
A little late, but I wouldn't miss it.
Right. Shall I announce to the world what is happening? We have. Tonight is Sunday night, and it's the second Sunday night since the last second Sunday night, which means it's a worldwide story round hosted by an inimitable Mike Rust from Get Our Word in Edgeways. Big round of applause for Mike. Not many people applaud him, so shall we just big him up a little there. Mike, would you care to run the proceedings?
It's always a compliment when I get introduced by you, John, and thank you very much. You are looking at a very ordinary person, I must admit. Right, so here we are again. We're at the World Storytelling Round. We're about to start on another story round. I'll be here for as long as we've got. I'm going to ask Karen to go first because she's actually in the back of a village hall in the middle of an anniversary or something, popping in to say hello. Last week she popped into the club and she told us a lovely story. So I'm going to go to Karen. So I'm going to say, everybody, if you don't know it, please mute yourselves before while the other person's talking. John, that includes you.
Yeah,
Chuffy, it's lovely to see you there. Perhaps we'll get to see you and talk in a minute. So I'm going to hand over to Karen Pfeiffer. So Karen, over to you.
Thank you, Mike, and good evening, everybody. Lovely to be here, lovely to see you all. I've got a fairly short story for you today, and I hope you'll enjoy it. It's another story by Keith Donnelly, Mike. We were talking about it the other day when we Keith Donnelly, yeah. That's right. Yeah, it's my funny German accent. Well, everybody used to laugh at the woman who talked to the moon. Every night, it didn't matter what weather it was, whether it was a wonderful spring night or a very crisp, cold December night. The woman who talked to the moon would be sitting on a bench by the river under that wonderful leafy old tree. And she would talk to the moon and she would tell him what would have happened on the day. A typical evening or conversation would probably go something like this. Good evening, dear moon. What a wonderful night is this. How beautiful your shine or your sickle shape tonight is beautiful and it's nice and warm. What did you do today? I had a really good day. I was gardening first and then I was baking a cake for Leo to take to Tommy the tortoise's birthday. And everybody was really happy. I believe they had a really, really good party. Something like that. But when I say everybody was laughing at the woman who talked to the moon, that's probably not quite right, because her friends and her family were very concerned. On a family meeting at some point, they were gathering together and talking about her and saying, we got to do something about this. Really not sure. That's not really good. What can we do to stop her every night to go down to the river, to the bench under the tree and talk to the moon? And one of her best friends said, I've got an idea. Leave it with me. So everybody was content and they walked their ways. And so it happened the next night. It was a beautiful summer's night. It was nice and warm and the tree was leafy. The woman who talked to the moon sat on her bench by the river under the tree and started talking to the moon and said, what a beautiful warm night, dear moon. Lovely to see you. Are you happy tonight? No. Did you say something, dear moon? No. I mean, yes. I said no. But why, whatever, would you not be happy on a beautiful, beautiful, warm evening like this? Well, I just don't want you to talk to me anymore. But why on earth would you not want me to talk to you anymore? Don't you like what I say? No, it's not that, but people are laughing at you. They're laughing at you talking to me. And I don't like that. Yeah, but I don't mind them laughing. I mean, laughing is healthy, laughing is good. If they have fun, brilliant. Let them laugh, I don't mind that. Yeah, but they're not laughing in a good way. They're laughing at you, and I don't like that. Anyway, I just don't want you to talk to me anymore, and that's that. And for a moment, the woman who talked to the moon was quiet and sitting there and thinking. And then she looked up and said, dear moon, if you feel I shouldn't talk to you anymore, then I won't say another word. And she was about to say something else, but then she realized that she'd just said that she wouldn't say anything anymore, and then she didn't say anything else, and sat there for another minute or so, got up, and walked home. You can imagine how she felt, I suppose. 15 minutes later, if you had been down at the river by the bench under the tree, you would have seen her friend climbing down from the tree, walking back, meeting all the friends and family again and telling his story, what happened. And everybody congratulated him and said, brilliant, well done, you've done it, high five. You have actually cured her. You're a really good friend. The next night, the woman who talked to the moon sat on the bench by the river, under the tree, as she always did. Again, it was a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful summer's night. And she sat there and she looked up. Oh, dear moon, what was that all about yesterday? Talking to me down from that tree. Do they think I'm stupid or what? Well, I suppose they meant well, said the moon.
Keith used to send out, well, in the days before the publicity on the internet, everyone was sending out sheaves of publicity. Keith just sent out a bookmark to bookers, and it just said, ha ha, ha ha, ha ha on it. Keith Donnelly.
Yeah. Well, I've seen Keith be very nice to very people who are not as well advantaged as all of us. And if you can take the expression well advantaged in any way you like, but for the people who are poorer and less advantaged, Keith has always got 5 minutes for. And we meet in a big folk festival once a year, normally, which is at Whitby Folk Week. And Keith can't walk from one venue to another to another. He's always late because people are stopping him and want to talk to him. And
That's
he really is quite like that. And he has another habit, which people like John and me find reasonably annoying, is that everywhere he goes, they're good-looking young ladies come up to him and go, "Hello, Keith, can I talk to him?" Because it doesn't happen to me.
It has happened to John though, because I walked up. I mean, I don't say young, good-looking ladies, but I have gone to John at the festival and said, "Oh, hello, John, nice to talk to you." So there you go.
Well, there you go. Yeah, absolutely. Right. So right. So if you can mute your Karen, so because you've got the music to go. I'm going to go next, and after me is going to be Keith Donnelly. Keith Donnelly, Keith Buttery from Lincolnshire. Right. So I've been Stella, this is for you, and I hope it helps, and I hope it's something that you can take away with you. Because I've been lucky in my life, even from the 1970s. My mentor and my friend was a fellow called Dave Jones, and he was the director of Bromyard Folk Festival. And Bromyard Folk Festival was in the Shire that I lived in England, which is just a bit south of here, up against the Welsh borders. And I met another guy I got along the way called Duncan Williamson, and Duncan was a gypsy chief, and he collected stories all his life, and we seemed to get on well together. And so we ended up at Whitby Folk Week, and Whitby Folk Week. So I did Sidmouth Folk Festival. Then I just popped into Glastonbury for a weekend, and then I did Whitby Folk Week. And because my wife Lynn comes from that part of the world, I did Whitby Folk Week for the next 30 years in a row. And according to Malcolm Story, who ran it in those days, I just turned up whether he asked me or not. It wasn't quite like that. But so we've got lots of stories about Whitby and Duncan and everything else. But I was in Whitby itself when Davy Jones, as Baba C put it to me about a year ago, and I've used ever since, he moved from being with us to one of the ancestors. And to this day, I miss him. But I was at Whitby itself when the news came. And Annie, his wife, didn't want me to hear on the grapevine. She didn't want me to be able to walk into a bar and someone turn around and say, "Did you know Davy Jones had died?" So she contacted the office and she told Malcolm himself what had happened. And Malcolm, in the middle of a folk week, when they were doing just shy of 700 events in 7 days, he made time himself to contact me. He said, "Come into the office, Mike." And it was Malcolm himself who told me that Davy had passed, as I said, from here to being an ancestor. And I don't know what you fellas do, but if I'm by the coast, the best thing to do, particularly in the summer, is to take your shoes and socks off and go and walk on the beach. And that's exactly what I did. So I walked on a beach and turned around and came back again till a time I felt I wanted to face the world again. But Malcolm, he'd also told Lynn, and he'd also told Duncan. And I didn't know till years after that Duncan, he went through every pub, he went through every cafe, he walked round and round Whitby for hours and hours and hours until he found me. And he found me, and I was sat on a bench overlooking right out on the far. There's two piers that come round like this as they come out, and I was right at the edge, just watching as Karen's moon went down and the seas came rolling in, and just there trying to organise my mind to face the world. And Duncan came down and sat alongside me. And he spoke these words. He says, "I've got a folk tale to tell you, Mike." My answer, to my shame probably, and I'll tell you the truth all these years later, was short and expletive. I haven't got time for poxy little bloody folk tales, Duncan. I just don't want to hear it. And he sat there, and we sat there for about an hour. And finally he said, "It's getting late, Mike. I'll tell you this, then we have to go and find Lynn. She's got the kids and she'll be worried about you." And so he told me this, Stella. The life is but like a caterpillar. So a caterpillar is a little, I don't know if you have them in Greece, but up in the British Isles we have them, and they're small little things, and they grow around in wet, cold places, and they eat cabbages and things that aren't really, really tasteful in any way. But a caterpillar, it'll stop and it will turn into a chrysalis. And a chrysalis for a caterpillar is like it's dying. And it turns there, and from the chrysalis, Stella, comes a butterfly. And the butterfly, it always flies around in the sun. And the heat of the sun warms its wings, and it drinks the nectar. And the nectar is the most beautiful drink or food anywhere in the life. And it goes from one flower to another, and from one flower to another, drinking the most beautiful and eating the most beautiful things. And if you close your eyes and think, Mikey said, that's what your friend Davy's doing. That's what us gypsies would call a heaven. And that's where your friend is. So don't worry about him. He's having a really, really good time. But it is time for you to go and find others in your life because they need you. And I did have time for his story. And we walked back together, and I found Lynn and the kids. And we did what you all have to do when grief comes into your heart. And the next morning, Malcolm came and found me, and others around me came because they knew. And to this day, I miss Davy. I see his wife from time to time, and his children, and now his grandchildren, and everything else. And when I run festivals, and I sit down, and a voice in my mind says, you have to do the glamorous things by running a festival, Mike. I hear Davy Jones's voice in my ear saying, have you got enough toilet paper? Are the chairs in the right place? Are the tables in the right place? And have you got enough beer? Because that's the sort of things the really glamorous storytellers and folk festival directors have to do every day. And that's when I miss him. And so I hope that helps you, Stella. And I hope it gives you something to hang on to on the anniversary of your good friend. Right, so.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely pleasure. And sometime we get you over to the UK and we'll show you what a caterpillar is. Right, I'm going to go to Lincolnshire, which is full of flatlands apart from the bit that Keith lives on, because he lives on the highest point of Lincolnshire, as he keeps telling me. And he's got a really, really cool tractor that's almost as good looking as mine.
Yes, hello everybody, thank you. Yes, people come up to me and say in the festival, say, hello, John. And I say, it's not John, it's Keith. And then people go up to John and say, hello, Keith. And John says, no.
Well, I never get you two wrong. Okay, that's easy. John's taller than you are.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, I've got a story here that I told the other night at Rona's Chaotic Ceilidh, and I told it before some time ago now, over a year ago, at David Heathfield's marathon for the theme of peace. And it's very much on my heart and my mind at the moment, sort of praying for peace in different parts of the world, which is so sad to see all these wars in Ukraine and in Israel. So here we go. Well, once there was a sword, a very precious sharp sword that belonged to a king. And that sword was looking forward to maybe a time when he was at war, when he could be a gallant sword cutting down the enemy. Now, the king, he was quite a peaceful chap, and he loved sort of dances and parties and all kinds of things. He'd go to a bit of jousting maybe, and he was a very peaceful king. But one day, a neighbouring king had decided to invade. And so there was the potential of war. And so war was declared. And the sword was so pleased. I can now be a hero. I can cut down the enemy with my sharp edge. a sharp blade. And so the king set off with his army, with the sword and his scabbard beside him. They rode off, and they came to the battlefield. But there'd already been one skirmish, there'd already been one battle, and the sword looked around and saw all this devastation, and all these wounded soldiers crying out, and there was dead soldiers, and this awful smell. There was broken swords and shields and javelins. Ah, and the sword looked at, they said, I don't like war. This is not good. What can I do about it? He thought for a moment, and they decided to make a noise. And he banged on a local shield, and bang, 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 bang. Oh, boo, 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 boo. And all the other weapons, all the shields and the swords and the daggers and the javelins, and the lances said, what are you making that noise for? Said, I don't like war. I'm making a noise. I'm making a protest. And so all the other weapons, all the swords and the shields and the javelins, they joined in and make such a racket. Oh, bang, 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 bang. Oh. And this came to the attention of all the weapons in the opposing army, because the armies were facing one another, ready to fight one another. And these weapons shouted out, what are you making that noise for? And the sword said, we don't like war. We're making a noise. And so the weapons on the opposing army, they made a noise as well. And there was such a racket all night. Bang, 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 bang. Oh. Making such a noise. Banging on the shields and just crying out. And it kept all the soldiers on both sides awake all night. And so next morning, when they were due to battle, they were so tired that they had to catch up in their sleep. And the king said, well, we'll have to put the battle off till tomorrow. And so they slept that day and revived. And then that night, all the armour, all the swords and the shields and the javelins and the daggers and the lances, they made such a noise all night, keeping up all the soldiers. They couldn't sleep on both sides. Bang, 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 bang. Oh. And the next morning, the soldiers and the kings were so tired. They said, oh, we can't have a battle today. Well, I have to put it off till tomorrow. And this went on day after day and night after night. And eventually the kings, they decided, well, they would meet and see if they could resolve this problem. And they met between the two armies. When they started to chatting together and sharing about what had happened, about all the armour, all the swords and shields, and the javelins, the lances making such a noise all night. And eventually they started to laugh together. And they started to sort of chat about the whole situation. And all the soldiers on both sides said, well, what's happening here? They're both kings. They're just chatting and laughing and enjoying each other's company. And so what happened was that the two kings became friends, and peace was declared. And so the two kings, they would meet every few months, and they would talk about what's happening in their kingdoms, just sharing their lives and what's happening in their kingdoms. And so peace reigned. Now, if you think about the word peace, we think about absence from war. But shalom not only means absence from war, but it means well-being and wholeness and completeness. And so I wish you all shalom, wholeness and peace. Not just absence of war, but wholeness and good health. Shalom, shalom, shalom. Shalom Aleichem.
Wow. Thank you, Keith. Yeah. Did you ever hear Dan Kenning tell stories?
No,
The
no,
American.
no.
No, he tells one very, very similar to that.
Oh, right.
Yeah. I haven't heard anybody else tell one similar to that for a long time. So yeah. Right, it's Pete Donald from Scotland, and we're not talking about the rugby. Okay.
You're the one that mentioned rugby, mate. I never, I didn't bring it up. I just wore a Scottish hat. That's all.
Well, that's right. You've only beaten us 4 times in a row. Don't worry about it. Okay.
Yeah, I know, yeah. Well, anyway, I'm going to bang on tonight about how great Scotland is. I had a job a few years ago to go into a school and do some storytelling, and the theme was inventions. And they're talking about all the things that had been invented by Scots, like the telephone, television, Tar Macadam, the bicycle, the pneumatic tyre that goes in the bicycle, and discoveries of things like penicillin and antiseptic. And so I found some stories, but also I wrote a story as well, because what the kids had to do was they had to invent it. Didn't have to physically build it, but what they had to do was draw it, their own invention, draw it, and then write about it. So I thought of a story, try to think of a story that involved a school and inventing things, and I couldn't find anything. So I thought I would write one, and then it turned into a poem, and it's quite a long one. So here goes. The biggest event this side of Lent at the school where young Stanley attended was a contest to bring the most useful thing, a contest most fiercely contended. Now, you couldn't bring just any old thing you had taken down from the shelf. To be highly rated, the rules clearly stated, you had to invent it yourself. Now, Stan's greatest fear that, like every year, he would once again be runner-up, and that the class swot, Bartholomew Grot, would be the one lifting the cup. The problem was this, it was not hard to miss. Barry's dad was worth more than a mint. And as for poor Stanley, him and his family were several times worse off than skin. So Bartholomew pleaded for the things that he needed, and very soon had them to hand, but Stan scrimped and scraped. And his invention was shaped from sticks, string, and old rubber bands. This year, Stanley thought, I'll beat that class swot. All the teachers will vote for me. I'll invent a machine that gets blackboards clean, then makes them a nice cup of tea. So late that night, Stan drew up his plan and began to collect the material. Some tin cans, some bricks, some string, nails and sticks, and some old empty boxes of cereal. Some long lengths of metal, and he needed a kettle and 2 reels of strong cotton thread. And once he had got what he thought was a lot, he started to work in his shed. Now, Bartholomew Grot was a really bad lot. Life was easy, and here's how we get through it. When that scurrilous scum would want something done, he just bribed someone else to do it. Now, Barry the Creep didn't lose much sleep. He just snored away quite contented. But he knew while he slept, though he was quite inept, his invention was being invented. Well, there was no time for bed for Stan in his shed, working away like a beaver, making some wheels out of old cotton reels and his dad's cricket bat for a lever. By the time Stan was done, the bright rising sun was spreading its light across the land. So he packed up his tools and went off to school and hoped it all worked just as planned. The school hall was packed from the front to the back. The whole school had turned out to see the wonderful schemes and amazing machines and who the winner would be. Now Stan's turn was first, and it couldn't be worse. His blackboard fell right off the wall, and the sugar and milk and the tea all got spilt all over the floor in the hall. But what Stan did not know, a few moments ago, Barry, the horrible sneak, had crept in between Stan and machine and gave the controls just a tweak. The teachers went mad and called Barry's dad. So they called Stanley's dad to take him away from the school. And he just couldn't think why it went in a blink. He really did feel such a fool. Then to Stan's indignation, Barry's creation went off without one single hitch. But someone had seen him just Stan's machine and caused the disastrous glitch. A woman called Sadie, she was dinner lady, had witnessed poor Stanley's disaster. So she jumped up on stage in a terrible rage and duly informed the headmaster. At first Barry lied and plainly denied that he caused this terrible mess. But one of the team who had built Barry's machine jumped to his feet and confessed. Now Bartholomew Grot had certainly not expected to be caught red-handed. He just sat in his seat, exposed as a cheat. Terrible thing to be branded. And the head then announced that Grot had been trounced and Stan was to be reinstated. So Stanley stepped up and lifted the cup for this moment so long he had waited. So lessons were learned by all that were concerned. It's no use to try and pretend. If you want to cheat, you'll always get beat, for cheats never win in the end.
So you wrote that yourself?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Well done, well done. Wow.
And that was just for the want of finding a story on the theme that I wanted. And if you can't find a story, what do?
You
Make up your own.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree now. From one very fine poet to another very fine poet. John, are you doing something tonight? Right, you're on mute, so I can't hear you. So, Despina, I can see you there, but I don't know if you're just listening in or you're going to do something.
I'll do something in a few minutes, Mike.
I will be with you in a few minutes. I'm going to connect from my PC. Okay?
Okay, absolutely. So that leaves Sue, who's just popped in from South Africa, and she never tells a story, and it's lovely to see you. It really is. And so, right, well, everybody else is gone but me, and I've done one already. Okay, so I'll tell you what we'll do, because we never do this. A friend of mine called David Campbell, I don't know. Do you know David Campbell, Donald, from up in the Highlands, right? He's wanting to write a book of jokes. So, has anybody got a joke that they want to tell? I'm always good for collecting jokes. No, I'm going to tell a Taffy Thomas joke. All right. Now I'll tell it. It's on the principle that you're all going to sort of look at this and you're going to say, but next week, I promise you're going to tell it yourself. Okay. That's as simple as that. Because this is back in the day when Prince Wales was 18 and Prince Harry was 16. And the other person in the story is the Duke of Westminster, whose name is Hugh. And he was 18 as well. He's the same age. And now Hugh Westminster is the richest man in England and sometimes the richest man in the world. He owns half of Cheshire and most of London, basically. And they were both 18. And it was the Archbishop Carey. It was Christmas Eve. And he'd been invited up to Windsor Palace. And he looked at the St. George's Chapel And he said, well, you've got to decorate it. And the old Prince Philip said, well, we weren't going to use it. And he said, no, you've got to decorate it. So he turned around to Wills and went, Wills, go out into the Windsor Great Park, get something that we can decorate the church with. My church, St. George's Chapel. And off Wills went, got into a Land Rover, went into Great Windsor Park, brought back a whole load of holly. And he decorated it all. And the Bishop Carey, Archbishop from Canterbury, said, Wills, you're a fine prince of this land. You're going to be a great Prince of Wales, and one day you're going to be a fine king. So he turned around to Hugh and said, Hugh, the Duke of Westminster, to be, go and find somebody to decorate the church. So off he went to decorate the church. So off he went on a quad bike, and he came back with a whole load of ivy. And the Archbishop beamed. And he said, you've got the holly, and the other Duke of the Realm, one of the oldest Dukes of War, he's got the ivy. You are just two fine lads. And one day, you're both going to be a great peasants and a great sort of force for the good in this country. And what's more, the holly and the ivy, I think someone wrote a song about that. For Christmas Eve, let's all sing it. And he turned round to Harry. He said, Harry, go and find something to decorate St. George's Palace. And off Harry went, and he came back an hour later and said, I couldn't find anything. He said, what are you talking about? He said, all you've done is gone down to the pub and had a drink or something. There's plenty of things to decorate St. George's Palace at church in the middle of St. Windsor Castle on Christmas Eve. You're just a wastrel. You're just a pain in the ass. You're never going to achieve anything in your life. You just prove it. Go and find something to decorate St. George's Chapel. And off Harry went, a bit shamefaced. And he came back half an hour later, and he walked straight up to the Archbishop, and out from his pocket, he picked up a pair of completely red silk ladies' knickers. And the Archbishop said, what are those? And he said, they're Carol's. Right. Stella, I got a smile out of you tonight, Stella.
I'll give you a quick terrible joke.
That wasn't terrible. That was quite funny. That's
it was brilliant. No, mine's going to be terrible. There was a woman up in court. Woman was up in court, and she was charged with shoplifting. She stole a tin of peach halves. And the judge said, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to open this tin of peaches, and for every peach half in this tin, I am going to give you 1 month in jail. So he opened the tin, and he poured them out, and he counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 5. Can't even count. 5, 6, 7, 8. There are 8 peach halves in this tin. I sentence you to 8 months in jail. And her husband shouted from the back of the court, she stole a large tin of peas as well.
Right. Right. So we'll go to John next, because he sat there with his computer all ready to go.
No, I'm not. I'm not reading from the computer. I'm going to tell a story if that's okay, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything you like, mate. Then we'll go to you, Despina. Okay.
Yeah. So a couple of years ago, about this time of year, we were in Marrakesh, and our guest of honor was Haj Ahmed, and this is why I had the Kahani. I had the computer so I could get the long bit of his name right. And he was a guest of honor. But a few years earlier, when I'd first met him, it was the first time I'd come across the Moroccan storytelling scene. And I was in Cafe Clock, and Haj and I sat in the corner, 2 old men swapping stories. And I told him a story of Duncan's. And I told him the story of the king and the little gardener and the king wanting stories. And he told me this. I don't think I've done it on here before. Way back in time, when my hair was dark and my beard was ginger and all my teeth were young, there was a king, and he loved stories. And he said, I'll open my palace to the storytellers. They can all tell me stories and they can live here and eat as much as they want. That's a really stupid thing to say to a lot of storytellers. I mean, so pretty soon, his pantry was empty. He'd send down for a sandwich. No bread, the storytellers have eaten it all. No cheese, the storytellers have eaten it all. Whatever he wanted, the storytellers had eaten it all. And well, you know that when you run festival, Mike, you know, no one asks what they're being paid. They say, "Oh, they're food tickets." And well, the king thought, well, I can't go back on my word, but I can change the rule. Whoever can tell me a story without ending can stay. But anyone who fails, off with their head. Well, soon every parapet was lined with heads on spikes. The whole city was surrounded by heads. And one day a storyteller turns up and he said, "I'd like to try, sir." And the king said, "Yeah, but are you sure? You know, you look a sort of, you know, decent sort of bloke, and you see all those heads up there." He said, "Yeah, I'll have a go." And he began. The king of the ants was out with his soldiers, and it began to rain. And they took shelter in a cave, and as their eyes got used to the darkness, they saw in front of them a huge mountain of wheat. And he turned to his 4 soldiers and said, "Take that 1 grain of wheat and take it back to the anthill." Well, if we had 3 hours per teller, I could tell you the adventures they had taking that 1 grain back, but we haven't. Suffice it to say, it took some months. And they took them less time to get back, and the king of the ants said, "Take this 2nd grain of wheat and take it back to the anthill." And they had even more adventures on that journey. And they got back, "Take this 3rd grain of wheat." And the king turned around to the storyteller and said, how long is this going to take? He said, "About a year, Your Majesty. Come back in a year." He came back in a year. And the last grain of wheat had gone, and behind that was a mountain of lentils. Got to the 3rd lentil. "How long's this going to take?" "About a year, Your Majesty. Come back in a year." And behind the mountain of lentils was a mountain of rice. Got to that 3rd grain, the king said, "Hold on, you know, how long is this? About a year, Your Majesty. We'll come back in a year." "Before I agree to that," said the storyteller, "I want to marry your daughter." And the king said, "That's not fair." And storyteller looked at all the heads on the spikes around the parapet and said, "Do you think that's fair?" The king said, "Well, you got a point." And so the storyteller and the king's daughter was married. And in that year, they had a son. And when the storyteller came back, the king said, "I think you won, because it wouldn't be very fitting for a king to kill his own grandson's father." And that storyteller lived there happily telling stories for the rest of his life with his royal family.
So there's a saying in England, and now on the Welsh Marsh here. Now I live on England and Wales, but so we're halfway up between England and Wales, Pays de Galles in the French, and our job is to keep the Welsh out. But in February, you can book a poet and a storyteller for half a pint of cider and a cheese sandwich. That's what we used to say. But it's a lot better than it was when I started 40 odd, 50 odd years ago, whenever it was, because I'm just well old now. So was I going to go
Well,
to Despina?
they let me over the border the other day to Newport to tell tales.
Did they? Did they let you
Yeah,
back?
yeah, I was allowed in.
Yeah, so we're not being pro. If you come from South Africa, we're not being pro about these things. Like, you know, if you come from Greece, don't worry about it. Gloucester to Newport's about 30 miles, but don't worry, there is a border that goes back a long way. Okay, right. So Despina, it is lovely to see you again. It really is.
You too, Mike, always. Sure. Are you sure you're not telling the story? Mike thinks you never tell stories. I don't know what that came from.
So who's this?
I'm talking to Sue McGuire.
No, Sue does sometimes, but sometimes she likes to just listen, and she tells me when she wants to tell a story. She texts me over on the chats and things. Okay. Okay. So we have an agreement. So if she wants to tell stories, she can. I just don't want to keep asking you when she says no.
Yeah, it's okay. It's like, absolutely. I'll do the pushing for you, Mike. Don't worry. It's just it's been so long, but I haven't heard the story from Sue, and I really like your stories. Anyway,
she's got some wonderful stories. She also knows if she tells a story, I just nick it and tell everybody else.
Which is exactly what I did with the story I'm going to tell you today. This story was given to me from a German Jewish friend of mine whose name is Moira, and I will be sending her the recording so she can enjoy this tale, because I always Despinize the stories a little bit. So I heard it from Moira, but then it's a whole new version of it. So from the Arabian Nights, from 1001 Nights Tales, many a time we hear the name of the great king Harun al-Rashid. And we know this person to be a benevolent king, a peaceful one who reigned for a long time in a very nice way and was very loved by his people. But what many people don't know, don't realize, is that he wasn't always like that. When Harun al-Rashid started off his career, he was a general in the army. And there was war to be made, so lots of battles and the like, and he was a good general. Men followed his orders, so he kept climbing up the ladder until at some point he himself became the Sultan. But still, there was war. But the story does not start with the king. Quite the contrary. It starts with a totally other person who was a very simple man. And when I say simple, that is not to say that he was leading a simple life. He was kind of simple in his mind. He had the body of a grown man, but in his mind, he was still maybe 6 or 7 years old. So that person's name, Mafluf, he lived in a village. And he was well loved by the villagers, and once a group of villagers had business with a palace, so they had to make all this long journey to the palace of Harun al-Rashid, and they decided that it would be a good idea if they had Mafluf with them in, let's say, some sort of entertainment along the way. So they invited Mafluf to this trip to the palace, and Mafluf was overjoyed to go, of course. But when they actually got there, they had serious business. They had negotiations to be made, as in commerce. So nobody was paying attention to poor Mafluf. And Mafluf, he just found himself inside this glorious, huge palace. And he started wandering around from room to room, from one big room to another. And his eyes were full of wonder with all the marvels that he was seeing, until in a very big room at the other side, he saw what to him looked like a very comfy armchair. And as he was tired from the journey, he decided that it would be really wise to take a minute and just rest there for a while. So he went, He sat himself and he just made himself as comfortable as possible, and he was tired, so he started nodding off, only to be awakened by loud shrieks coming from that door where servants, a whole bunch of them, were running his way. And Mafluf had no idea what was going on, but the servants, they grabbed him and they pulled him down off the throne. And as he was lying on the floor, the arch servant of them all, the arch eunuch, he said, "You filthy wretch, how dare you sit yourself on the Sultan's throne?" And Mafluf said, "Well, I didn't know it was the throne. Tell me now, how long did you spend there?" "Well, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes. 10 minutes, huh? You will have 1 lash for every minute you spend on that throne." And the servants, they grabbed Mafluf and held him tight on the floor, and they tore his shirt apart until his bare skin was visible. And then the arch eunuch, he took that whip of 9 tails in his hand, and he started whipping poor Mafluf on the floor. And Mafluf was crying out so loud and making such a kerfuffle that the Sultan himself heard. And soon Harun came in from that same door where the servants had entered, and he saw all the servants holding a wretched man on the floor who seemed to be quite poor from his outfit. And he stopped the arch eunuch immediately. "Hold on, why are you whipping that man?" And when they explained, and he saw Mafluf's face, well, it was quite obvious that that man had meant no harm. So Harun said, he was in good spirits that day, never mind, just let him be. And then Mafluf turned and said, "Are you the Sultan?" "I am." "And then, do you sit on that throne?" "I do." And Mafluf started crying even louder than before, than while he was being whipped. And Harun was taken aback, and he said, "Man, I have stopped my servants from whipping you. What on earth are you crying for now?" "For you, my lord, for you, sire, I'm crying for you." "Why are you crying for me?" "Well, you're the Sultan, and you sit on that throne." "Yes." "If I had 10 lashes for 10 minutes I spent on that throne, I can't imagine what's coming for you." And yeah, I know, it was very cute, wasn't it? Well, the Sultan, Harun al-Rashid, felt the same way. He felt it was really cute. So he decided not to send that man away, but instead to keep him as the court jester, let us say. So Mafluf spent his time in the court, and they changed his outfit, and he was well fed and well looked after. And the Sultan really liked him. But the war was not over. There were still battles to be had. And sometimes the battles lasted for a long time. So in one of those battles, Harun thought that he would take Mafluf with him, just, to keep his mind off the battle. And it had been an awful day. It had been a very bloody battle. Harun had lost many a good man on the field. And when he returned to his large tent, his kaftan was stained with blood all over. I myself have no idea, and I hope to the whole universe I never get to have an idea, but they say, men who have been on the battlefield, that all the adrenaline rush and the war makes a man thirsty. So Harun entered the tent in very bad spirit, and he called out, "Mafluf, get me water." And Mafluf rushed, and he took these lovely carafes with the jars, the metal ones that are engraved so beautifully. We have seen them in Marrakesh, if you remember. He took one of those in one hand, filled it with water, and a glass in the other, and he rushed to his master. But before he had a chance to serve him the water, The Sultan just grabbed the jar and with a huge gulp, gulped all the water down. More, he said, and Mafluf rushed and filled the jar again, and he took it back to the Sultan and gulp. The Sultan had a second jar. Enough. Mafluf took the jar from the Sultan's hand, and when the Sultan was rested on his pillows in his tent, Mafluf said, "Sire, can I ask you a question?" "Yes, Mafluf, go away, ask ahead." Let us imagine that we are lost in the desert, you and I, and that there is no water to be found anywhere, and that we are in terrible need of water. Thirst is burning our throats, but there's no water anywhere. And before we leave our final breath on the sand, somehow I manage to procure water for you, and I give it to you, and you have the same sense as you just had a few minutes ago when you drank down that jar. What would you give me in form of payment, let's say? Well, if I were to find a horrible death in the desert out of thirst, and you were the only one who would save me, I consider it would just be fair if I gave you half of my kingdom. I see, sire. Thank you. Can I ask you another question? Go ahead, ask me. Let us say that and I forgot to tell you that after consuming the two large jars, of course, for the Sultan, before Mafluf started speaking to him, the Sultan felt the call of nature, of course. It was 2 jars he had gulped down, so he was out behind a sand dune for a couple of minutes, and then he was back again. And this is when Mafluf started asking the questions, and he said, "Now, sire, let us suppose that you had this horrible disease where you felt the need to visit the loo, but there was no way for you to find relief. You just couldn't. Let's suppose that you had called all the doctors in the kingdom and asked for some cure for your ailment, but nobody could cure you. And then miraculously, I found a way to cure you, and you could finally do what you had to do, and you found relief, like you did a few minutes ago behind that sand dune. What would you give me then?" "Well, man, if I felt that my bladder was about to burst and that I was in terrible agony and you were the only one to cure me, I would only consider it fair to give you the other half of my kingdom." "I see, sire. Thank you." Mafluf, tell me, are there more questions like that coming? Is this going somewhere? No, my lord, I'm just making some calculations, some maths in my head. Maths? You're doing maths in your head. Okay, now I need to know. Mafluf, please tell me, what kind of calculations are you doing? Well, sire, I was just thinking that, this wonderful kingdom we love so much, all our territories, and all the honest men that are so brave and so loyal to you, we lost them today. Would you say that all this kingdom for which we're fighting for and making wars is worth 2 jars of water and a visit to the loo? Well, that had Harun thinking deeply. "Go away, Mafluf, I need to be alone. I'll call you when I need you." So Mafluf was out of the tent. Harun was alone inside the tent. and everybody was waiting for the Sultan to come out and give them orders. But Harun did not get out of the tent that day. He did not get out of the tent the next day. He came out of the tent 3 days later, and he called all his men, all his trusted men, the best ones among them, and he made a group of them and sent them as emissaries to the enemy to try and find some way to do peace. And when both sides gave up enough and a peace treaty was signed, the Sultan, Harun al-Rashid, he took his men and Mafluf, crossed the desert, returned to the palace. And they say that after that day, never, ever during his reign was there another war waged. All this time, all these years, he kept Mafluf close to him. Mafluf speaking in the Sultan's ear with his simple, naive, altruistic voice. And the Sultan was wise enough to listen. And this is how we still tell tales about that benevolent king up to this day. So shalom, Keith, as you said it. May peace reign.
Well, that was great. That's lovely. And we've been here just over an hour or so. Everybody's had a chance to tell a story that wants to tell a story. And I say it every time, if you want to pop in and tell a story, you'd be very welcome to. Sue, I can see you waving at I.
Can I tell you a quick story?
Absolutely, you can.
Okay, will do. Let me just get everybody else quiet. Jeremy, shh, I'm going to tell a quick story. So no shout outs. Hi, everyone. So let's go to Zululand, and I'm going to tell you a little story about a naughty piglet. So in Zulu tradition, when we start a story, we say, I'm going to tell you a story and we are going to cook him in a pot. So you all have to say, we are going to cook him in a pot. Okay. So it can get very, very, very warm in Zululand. It's a beautiful, beautiful part of the country. And everybody there farms. In this particular place, Mother Pig and the little piglets had just had a wonderful morning digging in the mud when they decided in the afternoon to go and have a nap. So they all passed out in the shade, except for the youngest little piglet, who was extremely curious and just wanted to know more about the world. And that's in spite of the fact that Mommy had said, you will not go anywhere unless I say you can. So he said, oh, I'll go and explore. Nothing will happen to me. And off he trotted down the road. And he came across Donkey. And Donkey said, good morning, little piglet. Sorry, it was good afternoon. And little piglet said, oh, you donkey with your long, long ears. Don't you dare talk to me. Why don't you just go and lick your ears somewhere? And Donkey felt so awful about this and just stood there. And then little piglet trotted on and on and on and on, and he came across Tortoise, and Tortoise said, hello, little piglet, where are you off to? And Piglet said, I'm not speaking to you, Tortoise. How dare you speak to me? Crawl back into your shell, you silly creature. I don't talk to tortoises. And off he trotted and trotted until eventually he came to a tree, and there was the crow. And the crow said, "Hello, little piglet, where are you going?" And little piglet said, "Ha, crow, fly away, go and groom your feathers. I don't talk to crows." And he trotted off, and there he arrived in the farmer's field. And of course, what was in the farmer's field? The most glorious sweet potatoes that you could just dig out and eat. And little Piglet started digging and digging and chewing away. But there was the farmer, and farmer shouted, "Dog, dog, get that pig!" And little Piglet went, he started running back home. And when he got to Crow, he said, "Crow, Crow, Crow, stop the dog." And Crow said, "I'm busy grooming my feathers." And dog came even closer. Little Piglet said, and he got to Tortoise and said, "Tortoise, please help me chase the dog away." And Tortoise said, "No, no, 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 I'm too busy hiding in my shell." And off he ran, and he ran, and he ran, and the dog came closer and closer and closer. He got to Donkey, and he said, "Donkey, Donkey, please, please help, please, please help. The dog's going to catch me." And Donkey said, "No, no, no, no. I'm just standing here grooming my ears. I don't have time to help you." And little Piglet ran, and just when Dog was about to get him by the tail, he got through the fence and ran up to Mom, crawled over her, and just lay down amongst his little brothers and sisters. And Mom Pig woke up and said, "Piglet, what have you been up to?" He looked at Mum and said, "Oh, nothing." And he promptly fell asleep. Go. We cooked you in the pot.
We cooked him in a pot.
Oh dear.
Well, that was lovely. I think we've come to an end. It's been lovely to be. I'll be here in 2 weeks' time. It's just after 7 o'clock, so it's just been a few of us tonight. But we're going back to once a fortnight, so I'm sure things will pick up again as we go through into the spring. It's lovely to see you all, and I'll hand over to John to say the final words, and I will disappear quietly and go and sit by a log fire in the middle of winter. But spring is springing in Shropshire, so there's no drops
Yes,
of
but
fading
the
over.
windscreens had ice on them this morning.
Yeah, and the daffodils are coming through, and I've been down in Worcestershire all weekend, and it's been lovely down there. So, okay. Over to John. There we go. And thank you to Waleed for doing it again in Marrakesh.
And thank you, Mike, for hosting this. Big round of applause, Mike Russ. Thank you. And what's coming up? Well, as Mike says, in 2 weeks' time, we've got this again, and I can't remember the date, and it will be somewhere, but just think 2 weeks. And next Friday, we've got a real treat from our children's Stories for Children. I say they're stories for children, but they're stories for everybody. It's just an excuse. So we got Maya Ganatra from Tanzania, which is always a treat to listen to Maya. And so she's on. We're taking a little break on our Tuesdays for now. And I'm debating where to put it, whether we're going to have it when it's going again, whether we're going to do it on Tuesday or whether we're going to do it before the Friday stories, because then children don't have to get up to school on Saturday morning, so they can stay up a bit later, and make it 5 o'clock on Fridays before the stories for children. But that's I'm letting that cook in the pot for a while before I make a decision. But meanwhile, thank you very much for coming, and thank you, Mike, again for running it, and Waleed in Marrakesh for flying the magic carpet. Thank you, Waleed. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Time if I don't see you before. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
And before we go, Donald's gone. No, Donald
Oh,
is
yeah.
still there. Are you okay to do the Monday of on the community stage at Chippenham Folk Festival? You'll still be with us on the Monday.
John, you know that anything I ask you, anything you ask me, I just say yes. So yes.
Well, yeah, but it's polite to ask. I mean, I know I'll break your legs if you say no, but it is polite to ask.
Yeah, mate, I'll do that.
Okay, cheers.
I'll do that. Right, no problem.
Bye.
No
Thank
problem.
you.
Right,
Bye-bye,
bye,
everyone.
everybody. Bye.